Welcome to Girl Read Your Bible, Sunday School for Adults Who Missed It. I'm Nicole Waltz, your host for this podcast, brought to you by 522gals.com, a website dedicated to personal development and spiritual growth. Go and check it out. And please follow us on social media. You can find us on social media at 522gals, and there is lots of encouraging posts and good things that's going to help you just keeping your faith in front of you and in the forethought of your mind, and just really encourage you. Plus, there's a lot of follow-up from this week's episode, whichever week you're in, of Girl Read Your Bible. We like to make posts regularly that's going to help you stay thinking about and meditating on the things and the people that we are learning about, the people whose stories were so important that they made it into the Bible, and their lives and stories are still relevant for us today, and we can learn so much. And today we are continuing our incredible series on Moses and his incredible life, and we are getting started. We had to cut short last episode because there was so much to unpack and uncover. So if you haven't watched the last episode, it ties into today really well. The story doesn't separate. Last week's and this week's doesn't separate into nice small pieces. They're not standalone. These two merge in together pretty well. So make sure you have listened to last week's episode so that you know exactly what's going on today. But today is really important because we are going to be talking about the 10 plagues of Egypt, and we are going to be talking about Passover. And Passover is really significant. I think it's so relevant and cool for you to know that this is where it starts. Passover is still celebrated today, and it is a very important festival throughout time and throughout the story, the time that Jesus walked the earth. Jesus is crucified over Passover. This is the Passover. This is where he has the meal, the Last Supper. I mean, this is over Passover time, and so it's a really relevant. It's so important to know about and unpack because it's really cool when you can see how everything works together. That this was always God's plan and promise, and that He's foreshadowing Jesus in the story of Moses in this time of where the foundation of Passover is. And so it's a really, really important story to know. And I'm excited to continue to talk to you about it this week. We are getting started in Genesis chapter 12. And for the sake of time, I want you to read this. I always, friends, want you to read it for yourself, not just with me, but for yourself. It's very important that you know the scripture and own it for yourself. But I'm going to skim some of it. So I'm not going to read every line word for word, and I want you to follow along with me, but I also want you to make sure that you, in fact, take the time to learn and to read every word. It's really valuable to your spiritual growth. And there's a lot to unpack in here, and there's a lot of details, so I'd like to skip over some of the details. We don't live in a time where we make actual animal sacrifices. I want you to understand, though, because I've heard so many different things lately in culture about the relevance, but this was a common practice throughout all cultures, different types of sacrifice. It just seems so strange to us now. I want you to understand that it carried quite a bit of symbolism, and symbolism is really important to God. I would compare it now to baptism, to go and to get baptized. Do you absolutely have to? That's argued so much. You should. It's not about if you have to or don't have to. You should. It's commanded to us to do it. Jesus set the example that he himself, who didn't need to be baptized, was still baptized to set an example that it's a symbolic gesture, that you are making a declaration to yourself, to the people around you, to your community, that you are a new creation, that you have come up anew, that you are following Jesus, that you follow and you believe. And so symbolism is really important. Is there anything actually valuable in the water? I mean, does it matter? I live in Florida. We have a lot of churches who do baptisms, big giant baptism Sundays, and they'll have them at the beach, and they'll baptize dozens or even hundreds of people on a Sunday. In salt water in the ocean. And then you have several churches that'll have baptisms and they're bringing in like a big blow up pool or a trough type thing. And then you have some that are, the baptism is built into their stage or what have you. Like there's nothing special or significant in any of these bodies of water where the baptisms are taking place. The significance is in the action. It's in the example that you're setting. It's in just the demonstration, and it's symbolic of being a new creation. Okay, so I say all that so that you have an understanding that these sacrifices were very important, and there's a lot of details from the Lord of how he wants these steps to be followed out. But know that it was all about symbolism. It was all very symbolic. And ultimately, spoiler alert, Jesus is going to be that ultimate sacrifice, the covering of sin with his blood. And so it is very gruesome, but I want you to understand that in the eyes of God, in the eyes of all of us really, but in the eyes of God, sin is really gruesome. It's really that awful. We maybe put a little too much grace on it sometimes. We maybe put a little too much tolerance on sinfulness, right? God doesn't. It's really detestable and horrible for him. But Jesus has come and been the ultimate sacrifice to cover that. And I don't want us to look at this story because we can. Like, let's be honest. We look at the sacrificial things, and then you got goats and sheep on altars, and it's weird. It's weird because this is not part of our culture, and we don't understand it. And we can find that really gross. I find it really gross. I'm just going to be honest with you. And I've grown up with these stories, and I still find this really like weird, gross things. I just know that it's the reality of the time that they lived in. I want you to think for a minute as you're being maybe perhaps judgmental in this way as I am about, the ritual of sacrifice, about how like gross and weird that is. So is sin. This gross and weird ritual is meant to cover up sin, to atone for sin, which is also gross and detestable. Do you see how the two things go together? We're looking at one like it's like, oh, well, that's just a thing. And then you can just say, I'm sorry and move on. Like, no, that's grace. That's the area that we live in now, the covenant that we have now, thanks to Jesus. And so that's incredible. And we're grateful and we're thankful because looking back, friends, the atonement process was actual literal animal sacrifice, which, I know is gross and weird. Remember and remind yourself, sin also gross and weird to us, but more so to God, right? He's looking at that so heartbroken. And this is the way that sins are covered. And it's also just showing out in demonstration, and it's foreshadowing, and it's showing us things to come. And so there's a lot of things that we will unpack from the incredible story of Passover. I'm sorry I rambled quite there for a bit, but we're going to continue together. We are in Chapter 12 of Exodus, and we're starting in verse 1. While the Israelites were still in the land of Egypt, the Lord gave the following instructions to Moses and Aaron. From now on, this month will be the first month of the year for you. Announce to the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each family must choose a lamb or a young goat for a sacrifice, one animal for each household. If the household's too small, then they need to share it with a neighbor. The animal you select must be 1-year-old male, either a sheep or a goat with no defects. Take special care of this chosen animal until the evening of the 14th day of the first month, and then the whole assembly of the community of Israel must slaughter their lamb or young goat at twilight. And they will take some of the blood and smear it on the sides and the tops of the door frame of the houses where they're going to eat that animal. That same night, they must roast the meat over the fire and eat it along with the bitter salad greens and bread made without yeast. Do not eat any of the meat raw or boiled in water. The whole animal, including all of it, must be roasted over a fire. Do not leave any of it until the next morning. Burn whatever is not eaten eaten before the next morning. See, God is big on specific instructions. He's giving them very specific instructions. I need to back up with you. It's very important that you do not miss this lamb's blood hyssop thing. They need to, back in verse 7, they are to take some of the blood and smear it on the sides and the tops of the doorframe of the house where they're going to eat the animal. That's the symbolism, friends. There's this whole thing that I'm not going to get into too long with you today. It's called the threshold covenant, and it would have been part of their culture that when somebody comes into your home, they're covered by you. You take responsibility for them. It was part of culture in the day and time. Like, it's a very serious thing that you have welcomed somebody in your home and now you are responsible for them. So the doorway of your house is a very symbolic covering and covenant, commitment, promise that you are going to care for those in your house. And so taking this blood and smearing it on the door frames and the doorposts all around is incredibly symbolic. And that is also what the angel of death in this plague is going to look for. If you have followed these instructions as God has given, and you have the blood on the door frame, then the angel will pass over your house. And that, friends, is where we get the name Passover. So they still celebrate this festival because this is the last one. Spoiler alert. This is the last plague. We'd had 9 plagues we talked about last episode. This is the 10th. We've had 9 plagues where God has shown a strong hand. He's shown himself to be the Lord, to be the most powerful God that there is, that they could possibly be. I told you, Pharaoh, Egypt, they have their own gods that they worship and believe in. They have their own sorcerers who can do magical stuff. And they're not sure about all this, but now they have seen God's mighty hand, Yahweh, show himself strong 9 times. So much so that the people of Egypt's hearts are moved. They are respecting the Israelites. They are respecting Moses. They are looking favorably on the people and saying, wow, their God is incredible. This is much more strength than we've ever seen from our strange gods. And so this is the big one, right? This plague that's coming, this 10th plague, and this is the one that is going to set them free. And that's why God's giving them these very detailed instructions, that they're going to celebrate this forever. This is going to be the festival forever. We're going to set your calendar by this festival. This is going to be the first month of the year for you guys. And you're going to follow all these steps because I need you to remember what I've done for you. God is so specific with them. He goes on. Please read the entirety of the chapters for yourself. I told you we're going to skim a lot today. But he's so specific on all the details for this festival and what he wants them to do and how he wants them to carry it out, because he wants the honor, respect, and remembrance. People need to remember what God has done for them in order to continue to have strong faith in him. That's true for us too, still, friends. I have this assignment for you this week. I recommend you do it for yourself. You make your own choices, but I have this really, really valuable assignment for you that goes along with this. I want you to get out a notebook, any old notebook, and I want you to write down 5 ways that you have seen God show up and intervene for you in your life. Something that maybe was negative, but you've seen how it was positive later on. Maybe a breakup. You were super devastated at the time, but then as time went on, you were like, wow, I'm really glad that breakup happened, because holy cow, what was I thinking? Okay. Or a job opportunity that came or missed, something that you really thought you wanted, but then when it didn't play out for you, you've seen like the error of your ways, of your thinking perhaps. I don't know what God has done specifically in your life or how he has orchestrated the timing, that if you sit with yourself and you sit with the Lord and you just look back on your life, you can see, maybe even before you came to Jesus, even before you knew that you wanted to be a Christian and that you believed and that you wanted to follow the Lord, that you can still see where he had worked things out for you in your past, where something happened that at the time did not seem like it was the thing that you wanted, but it became something instrumental in your life. If you write down 5 times that whenever you're in a season of doubt or fear or uncertainty, you can look back on that notebook, on those 5 things, and you can be reminded of how the Lord has actually always worked things out for you. Just like in this story, they didn't think, every one of these plagues, the work was getting harder, God wasn't showing up in the way that they expected him to. They didn't see any of this. They didn't know this is how God was going to work any of this out. But ultimately, it will be for the protection and the benefit of the entire nation of Israel. So it's important that we remember and recall the ways that the Lord has actually shown up for us. That's what he's telling us here with this important story. That's why he's not just like saying, yep, this is my hand. I told you guys I'd show up. Carry on. He gives them all these details for this festival that he wants them to continue to have forever literally said, this is my festival forever. And the people in Israel still celebrate Passover today. Like they still have this festival. This is still a holiday for them where they still, eat the bitter salad and have roasted lamb and do all these things because they are remembering what God has done for their ancestors and how God has shown up in the past. God knows that human beings have really short attention spans and not so great memories. And so he is telling them it is important that you pass this story on from generation to generation, and that this is my forever festival, and that you remember what I have done for you, and that I have shown myself strong as the God of you people, and that you will carry that through all time, for all time. I think it's incredible that we're reading about this in this like look how, like, if you're watching on YouTube, like, you can see me holding up you're very thin. If you're holding your own Bible at home, that's great. You can see we're only in Exodus. There's very few pages here compared to the rest of this whole book, plus where we are in time. Just thinking about like timeline, I'm sorry, my mind gets blown over little things. I'm like, we're not very far into the history of the world, and for God to be showing up in this way, but we're thousands of years later and we're still talking about this. This is still relevant. I'm sorry. I find that incredibly amazing. I hope you do too. Let's keep reading. I'm sorry I'm belaboring on the same point over and over. He gives them very clear instructions for how they eat it, for how they dress it, for, wear your sandals and your walking stick. I mean, as I'm perusing through, like, there's very detailed instructions for how to eat this meal and how to prepare this meal and all the things, because God wants them to show honor and respect. It's important, and he's developing a culture of honor and respect. We are going to start reading just a little on verse 12 because it's important that you hear this part. On that night, I will pass through the land of Egypt and strike down every firstborn son and every firstborn male animal in the land of Egypt. I will execute judgment against all the gods of Egypt, for I am the Lord. But the blood on your doorposts will serve as a sign, marking the houses where you are staying. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. This plague of death will not touch you when I strike the land of Egypt. There's so much we have to unpack in the statement from the Lord, as he's given them all the details on what to do for Passover. I just told you about the door frame, the blood on the door frame, very important, significant part. Very representational about Jesus and the cross in the future, but none of them know that now and won't for a long time. In any case, it is really cool how God is giving them this full picture of what he is going to do. I think it is really important to clarify that God has given them their method, their path to salvation, to rescue. He's saying, I'm going to pass through. This angel of death is going to pass through, and it's going to strike down. I am executing my judgment against the gods of Egypt. He doesn't say against the people of Egypt. So we're going to circle back to that because that's really significant. But he's going to execute his judgment, and he's given them their salvation plan. He's given them the rescue strategy. He says, follow these instructions with the lamb thing, the firstborn lamb that's a year old, and put the blood on the doorframe. Very important. And then I will pass over your house. Now, I already told you before, we've had 9 previous plagues, and even with the hail plague, we saw a lot of the Egyptians who were like, oh, Moses said, the Lord said that the hail is coming, so they pull their animals in and their people inside, and they are acting on faith. They now acknowledge that Moses is speaking for the Lord, and the Lord has said that he's going to do this, and they know that he will. So they are taking precautions and doing what they can to escape danger. Okay. So in any case, I say all that to say this. God gives them this instruction of this blood on the doorframe thing as a sign of Passover. Now, I personally believe, without it being spelled out for me here, that holds for anyone. He said, if you do that, if I see blood on the doorposts, I'm going on the doorframe, I'm going to pass over. If you're a smart Egyptian, and I believe that there were smart Egyptians who were watching and acknowledging all of these things that were going on, and were believing in this incredible Yahweh, the God of the Israelites. And I think that they followed suit. So I actually believe that anyone who acted on their faith in God, in the Lord, then they followed what the Israelites were doing. The Israelites were doing this thing with the blood in the doorway. And so I think that they would also have done that, asked them, what are you guys doing there? And found out about it. Rumors spread really fast, especially in olden culture, because there's no other source of entertainment. So in any case, I feel like they would know. And then the people who were honoring the Lord and believing and recognizing Yahweh as a much more powerful God than anything that they'd ever known before would have also followed these instructions. Do you guys understand? I hope I'm making sense there. And so same thing applies. I also believe, without it being spelled out for me right here, that there were probably still bitter people in the Israelite camp who didn't want to listen to Moses from the beginning and was irritated about all the things that has played out, and perhaps did not follow or respect the instructions that they were given. And so this was a covenant agreement where the Lord said, if I see the blood, if you follow these instructions and I see the blood on the doorframe, I'm going to pass over, and the children, the people of this house, in that house, are going to be spared. But you have to follow the instructions. You may wonder why I'm belaboring this so much. Because it's relevant for today. We have a lot of people who, this is a little deeper than Sunday. This is a little deeper today. We have a lot of people who argue or contemplate God's loving forgiveness and what that looks like, and what's the expectation and of really, what does it mean to really be saved, and who really counts and who really qualifies. Look, God's given us a very clear example. And I told you, the Old Testament is foreshadowing the New Testament. God's always he remains the same. He's just showing us in different stories and different examples so it can sink in for us, right? And he's showing us the way. saying, I'm giving you the solution. I'm giving you the out. I'm showing you how to be safe and saved. And all you have to do is act on that faith. It's not enough for them to have been sitting around listening to Moses telling them the instructions, saying like, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, yeah. No, they had to actually go out into their field and get the lamb and follow the instructions and do the blood on the doorway. They had to put action behind their faith. It wasn't enough for them to like agree with him and be like, yeah, that sounds fine. We believe you heard from the Lord, Moses. I'm kind of tired though, and I'm probably not going to go out and look for a lamb. So that's probably not, it feels like a lot of work, this Passover dinner you want me to prepare. But, I believe that you probably heard from God, and I'll probably be fine though. Do you understand the comparison that I'm making? I hope you do. I hope you're following right along with what I'm trying to say. It is important to put action behind your faith. That way it's actually real and not just something you're just processing and thinking about from time to time. And God is showing us this is how he works and operates. He's like giving you an out as long as you actually have faith and then put action behind it. True for us today. Today we don't have to worry about animal sacrifices and atonement for sin. We have to have faith in Jesus, but believing in Jesus, I believe that Jesus was really the Son of God and he died and rose again. Yes. And then we're like, we're good, right? Right? I'm good because I believe that happened. Friends, I think you have to put some action behind that acknowledgement. It's not enough to just acknowledge. It's not enough to just say, that's it. That's it. Actual faith has some action behind it, and they're demonstrating that here with the Passover. Now, I've gotten a little off. It's all relevant, but it's outside of the scope of our story here today. So it is, I want you to read, like I told you, all of chapter 12. Very important. One of the significant things that they had to do and still do to this day is that all the yeast has to be removed from their home. They have to eat the bread without yeast. And that was because yeast was symbolized sin. So all the yeast from the entire camp had to be removed. And so I want you to read it for yourself. Please do. But chapter 12, verse 24, we're going to skip ahead a little. Remember, God is still speaking to Moses. Remember, these instructions are a permanent law that you and your descendants must observe forever. When you enter the land the Lord has promised to give you, you will continue to observe this ceremony. Then your children will ask, what does this ceremony mean? And you will reply, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, for he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt. And though he struck the Egyptians, he spared our families. When Moses had finished speaking, all the people bowed down to worship the Lord. So the people of Israel did just as the Lord had commanded through Moses and Aaron. And that night at midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn sons in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn son of the prisoner in the dungeon. Even the firstborn of their livestock was killed. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the people of Egypt woke up during the night, and a loud wailing was heard throughout the land of Egypt. There was not a single house where someone had not died. Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron during the night. Get out, he ordered. Leave my people and take the rest of the Israelites with you. Go and worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds as you said, and be gone. Go, but bless me as you leave. All the Egyptians urged the people of Israel to get out of the land as quickly as possible, for they thought, we will all die. See, they thought it was going to get even worse. They said if this happened, it's going to be so much worse. And so they were very consumed by fear. Verse 34, the Israelites took their bread dough before yeast was added. They wrapped their kneading boards, in their cloaks and carried them on their shoulders. And the people of Israel did as Moses had instructed. They asked the Egyptians for clothing and articles of silver and gold, and the Lord caused the Egyptians to look favorably on the Israelites, and they gave the Israelites whatever they asked for. So they stripped the Egyptians of their wealth. And that night the people of Israel left Ramses and started for Succoth. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that. There were about 6,000 men, plus all the women and children. A rabble of non-Israelites went with them, along with great flocks and herds of livestock. For bread, they baked flat cakes from the dough without yeast, and they had brought from Egypt. It was made without yeast because the people were driven out of Egypt in such a hurry that they had no time to prepare the bread or other food. And so it would be symbolic of their ceremony forever. And then the yeast would come to represent sin. It tells us that later. The people of Israel had lived in the land of Egypt for 430 years. In fact, it was on the last day of the 430th year that the Lord's forces left the land. And on this night, the Lord kept his promise to bring his people out of the land of Egypt. So this night belongs to him, and it must be commemorated every year by all Israelites from generation to generation. Very important. And now he goes on to like even more instructions, reiterating the instructions for Passover and giving some extra details. And I want to talk about two very important things that we have skimmed over. One, I want you to know that I've done some research, because if you're researching and things come up and you realize that they don't correlate, I don't want you to be confused. So we just read in the scripture here where it says they were in Egypt for 430 years. But we also seen a passage where we had timeline of birth years in order. And if you do the math ain't mathin'. So I want you to know that this is one of those weird situations where translations, there's sometimes a little bit lost in translation, and it's not super important. It's a minor detail here, but we like timelines, we like data, we like information, and so we want to have it accurate. And so I want you to know that after researching it and seeing that the math wasn't mathing too well, it does actually look more like what it meant to say. How it should have perhaps translated there was that it had been 430 years from the time of the promise. I actually think, after looking over some things, that the 430 years there was the time that the Lord promised Abraham, made covenant with Abraham, to now. So he's fulfilling that promise in this Exodus, which is where we get the name of this book, friends. They are now exiting Egypt. So it is the Exodus. And so a period of time has passed from the covenant made with Abraham to this, all the things that has happened to their generations of family. And I don't want you to get lost on things. So sometimes, you're researching things about the Bible and you see that there's conflicting information. Sometimes that's just because of the way things were translated improperly. And honestly, friends, if it was a detail that was important, then that wouldn't be the case. So I just want you to know, because it did flag for me when I was doing some research. And then I had to go down the rabbit hole and be like, well, why does it say it like that? And it's irrelevant. There are still people who will completely defend and say, no, from the time that Joseph entered Egypt to the time that they exited Egypt is 430 years. Perhaps that's accurate, and what I just said was inaccurate. The timeline is a minor detail, which is just trying to help understand how God had, in fact, kept his promise even over a long period of time. That's the actual important part of the takeaway. But the thing I'm excited to talk to you about and explain, because I didn't learn this in Sunday school. I learned it many years later, and I think it's really interesting. So I hope you'll think it's interesting too. Why are there 10 plagues? I know we talked about Moses is developing and growing as a leader, and the people of Egypt are getting to see the hand of God and understand that while they are worshiping many lower G, small type gods, that there is an actual one true highest power Yahweh God, right? And that they are getting to experience and see and know his name, and he is making himself famous and making sure his name is spread so that people will come to honor God, because that is what he wants for the world. And so it is interesting though, because I'm like, it's got to be something specific, right? Like God is wildly specific. We see this playing out with the Passover instructions. God cares about details. So if we have 10 plagues, there must be a reason. And in fact, there is a reason. There was, and I pulled this up, and so you can also find this. I'll put this in the show notes because I think it's super interesting. There are 10 gods of Egypt in Egypt that they are worshiping. And so there is I'll go down them in order. I pulled this up from an article, and it's really interesting, I think. The first was the water to blood in the Nile. That was the first plague. And that was the I probably will pronounce it wrong, friends. Bear with me. Hapi, which is the god of the Nile, and Isis, which is the protector of the Nile. And so this was an affront against Egypt's gods. So to turn the water into blood. The frogs was Higit, the god Higit that they worshipped. The frog, it's a frog-headed goddess of fertility and birth, and her symbol became a source of misery. So, it's an affront on the gods that they are worshiping. That's why it was 10 plagues. That's why it's these specific types of things that are happening. The frogs, the locusts, the gnats, the flies. Because I thought it was weird too. I was like, gnats are, that we have the plague of the gnats was third. Gnats and lice. Sometimes it can translate both ways. And lice would be grosser and worse. But gnats are also awful. And then it's immediately followed by flies. And I was like, they're very similar, kind of. I mean, they're both awful, but like they're similar as far as like going from plagues. I mean, we go from like blood in the water to like gnats. These are not comparable. So what's God saying here and what's he doing? He's attacking all of Egypt's gods that they are worshiping to show himself to be the actual God, the actual ultimate power, to show himself higher than any of the things that they believe in, and so that they will be enlightened to know that he is actually the Lord, and that the Israelites are favored among God, who is like the ultimate God. And they think there's all kinds of like all these other gods over all these other little things. I find that super interesting. So we have the gnats / lice is Jeb, the god of the earth, whose dust was infested. And we have flies. I can't begin to pronounce this one. Kirpi, I don't know. The beetle-headed god of a rising sun, or Ucha, who is represented by a fly. There's when the livestock, that would be the god of Hathor, which is a cow-headed goddess of love. We have the boils, which is Isis, who is a healing god, or Sekhem, goddess of disease and protection. We have Hail, which is an affront against Nut, the goddess of the sky, or Set, the god of storms. We have the locust, which is an affront against Osiris, the god of agriculture and fertility, who had failed to protect Egypt's food supply. We have darkness, who is an affront, that is the plague that is an affront against the god Ra, or Horus, the god of light. So, which is the primary deity of the Egyptian pantheon. Okay, so they're like the top. This is like the top for their god order, and so they've come. Our God, the real God, the Yahweh God, has gone down the line to prove and show himself strong, to show himself to be the one true God to Israel, to the Egyptians, to the world. I mean, news of what's happening here is going to spread throughout. And then the death of the firstborn, it's an affront to Pharaoh himself, who considered himself to be a god here on the earth and have a divine throne. Therefore, he wouldn't be affected, but he was, in fact, affected by that last plague, and by all of them, but deeply by that last one. And so, now the Exodus is beginning. And now what God said would happen is happening. And the people are being told to leave the land, and they're actually even being favored upon exit. They're actually even seeing, their Egyptian neighbors are giving them silver and gold and clothing and things to take with them, because they are looking favorably on them, and they want the blessing. They see and acknowledge that these people are favored of God, and so they want their blessing. They want to be looked at well in their eyes, and so they're like, here, take all my stuff, so that you will in fact, speak blessing over me as you leave, because we are terrified of what your God is going to do if you stay here. And so they're on their way that very day. So this is why we still celebrate Passover. Very important. And then God tells Moses, and no, we're going on to chapter 13. Then the Lord said to Moses, dedicate to me every firstborn among the Israelites. The first offspring to be born of both human and animals belongs to me. That's just, that is just again, it's very symbolic of like you're dedicating and promising. That firstborn thing becomes really important. Because remember, friends, if you've been with me for a while and we've talked about all through Genesis and we've talked about all the different stories, we're seeing that they always thought the firstborn was going to be the chosen sons, right? We always think that that's the way it's supposed to play out because culturally it should have been, but it never is the way it plays out. It's always like, Isaac wasn't the firstborn. Ishmael was the firstborn. Isaac was the firstborn of the covenant wife, but it's like got a little gray and confusing. We saw the same thing play out with Jacob and Esau, where Esau was actually the firstborn, but Jacob's the one who got the blessing and the inheritance. And we see it play out again with Joseph, as he's like, I think he's like 10 or 11. Like Joseph's way down the list. He's definitely not the firstborn. So that's never coming into play the way we would expect it to, as we've read through the Bible stories, people's stories. But we're seeing God say, the firstborn is dedicated to me. Like he's making that establishment. And I think that's kind of interesting. But now we're seeing him again go over. It's funny to me, if you're reading through chapter 13, it's again the instructions for Passover, which we've already seen. We've already seen instructions for Passover like twice. So this is again more details and more instructions on how to remind your children on celebrating Passover, on following the instructions, even like for foreigners living among you, on the dedication of the firstborn and what you will say to your children in the future. I mean, that's all playing out here again in chapter 13, because why do you guys think? Why would you think that the Lord would be repeating this to Moses again? That he would be clarifying this again? Obviously, because it's very important and it has great significance, or it wouldn't be redundant. We don't see many redundant things in the scripture play out like that. It's rare. It's not never, but it's very rare. So it does tell us that this is a very important festival to God. And I got to say, I'm a little challenged myself personally. Like I feel like I should be figuring out exactly how to better preserve Passover, as it is very clearly important to God. And it's not something that I would say we acknowledge strongly in Christian culture. This is Jewish culture, and Christianity comes from Jewish culture because we come from Jesus, who came from Jewish culture. Like, we get it. So I'm wondering exactly what I don't think God's upset, right? But there's always extra ways to show our honor and devotion. And so I am for myself. That's a side note. I mean, tell me how you're feeling. How's that? Does that strike anything for you? Because when I read through this and I see that the Lord has repeatedly said, this is my forever festival. You will tell your children's children. I think we're doing that in a way just by, because Passover is for us would be resurrection, would be Holy Week, would be Resurrection Sunday. And so I think we are demonstrating a lot of these rules where we're like telling our children why we're doing this. We're having a feast. You're usually having like a Sunday dinner to celebrate. So I'm just wondering what extra things I could be doing to be honoring God more clearly, because this is his original covenant, and then he has fulfilled this covenant in Jesus. So he's not asking us to go out and get a goat or anything like that. I don't believe that at all. That's me personally, and I don't think that's the case. But I'm like, should we be eating unleavened bread for Easter dinner? Is that perhaps some way that we could be more honoring God? I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments. I'm very curious. Anyhow, we're all the way down to verse 17. We're in chapter 13, verse 17. When Pharaoh finally let the people go, God did not lead them along the main road that runs through Philistine territory. Even though that was the shortest route to the promised land, God said, if the people are faced with a battle, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. Yeah, because he knew that they would, friends. He knew that they were going to be a difficult people to wrangle, because they are, and it's going to be so fun to read about. But it's interesting to know he didn't send them on the shortest route because he knew they'd be faced with a challenge and that they would probably not be able to withstand that challenge. Remember that for your own life, friend. Sometimes God didn't take me on the shortest, never actually. Did God take me on the shortest, easiest route? Because I think he was very aware that I would not have been able to handle the challenges that would have arisen from that short route. He had we're going to have to take the long way around, Nicole, because you're going to have to learn some things. That's for you, friends. It's right there in the Bible in the Old Testament, but it's still true for you today too. And me, right? And me. Because we're saying, sometimes we got to take the long way around because there's things to learn and there's courage to be built. There's faith to be built. I'm developing your character. It's very important to me. And we can't take the short path because it's not the easy path. So God led them, we're on verse 18. So God led them in a roundabout way through the wilderness toward the Red Sea. Thus the Israelites left Egypt like an army ready for battle. And they took the bones of Joseph with them because Joseph had asked them to way back. And if you were following me on the Joseph series, he told them someday God will take you out of Egypt. And when he does, take my bones with you. And so they did. They honored Joseph in that way. And so the Israelites left Succoth and camped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness, and the Lord went ahead of them. He guided them during the day with a pillar of cloud, and he provided light at night in a pillar of fire. And this allowed them to travel by day or by night. And the Lord did not remove the pillar of cloud or pillar of fire from its place in front of the people. So whenever this pillar, whether it be a cloud in the day or a fire at night, whenever this pillar would start moving, the people would follow it, and it would stay still when they were supposed to stay still, and they would know, and the Lord would instruct Moses, and that's how they would know. We're in chapter 14, and we're going to wrap up here soon. Then the Lord gave these instructions to Moses: order the Israelites to turn back to the camp by a word I can't read, between Migdol and the sea. Camp there along the shore across from Baal-zephon. Then Pharaoh will think the Israelites are confused. They are trapped in the wilderness. And once again I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will chase after you. I have planned this in order to display my glory through Pharaoh and his whole army. After this, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites camped there as they were told. When word reached the king of Egypt that the Israelites had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds. Remember, he changed his mind several times after these plagues, and it's very important. What have we done letting all those Israelite slaves get away? They asked. So Pharaoh harnessed his chariot and called up his troops, and he took with him 600 of Egypt's best chariots, along with the rest of the chariots of Egypt, each with its commander. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, so he chased after the people of Israel, who had left with fists raised in defiance. The Egyptians chased after them with all the forces in Pharaoh's army, all his horses and chariots and charioteers and his troops. The Egyptians caught up with the people of Israel as they camped beside the shore. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked. When they saw the Egyptians overtaking them, they cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, "Why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were still leaving Egypt? We said, 'Leave us alone. Let us be slaves to the Egyptians. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness.'" Friends, we are going to have to talk about this because this is going to be a redundant theme among the Israelite people. And I'm sad to say it's a recurring theme among even today's people. God's people, period. Whether that be Israelites or you and me. They're out. They finally escaped. Things are looking good for them. God has given them a clear plan. He's given them instructions. He said, "For generations you are going to celebrate that I took you out of Egypt," which means that in his instructions, he also provided a promise that from now on you will be free. He provided that promise. It's in the instructions for Passover because he's saying every year you're going to celebrate and that I took you out of Egypt. And the people are happy because they see hope and light in the future, and they're camped out and they're getting ready to prepare and worship the Lord. And then off in the distance comes Pharaoh, more angry than they've ever seen him. An entire army is coming down at them. And their reaction should be, I'm just going to tell you, I am judging them here because they've seen so much. Their reaction should be to call on the Lord for help. Their reaction should be, "What should we do now, Lord? What would you like? We know you're going to take care of it. What's our role in what's happening right now? Look at Pharaoh. He still thinks he has some sort of power. Don't you know we're protected by the Lord Almighty? Don't you see the pillar of cloud or fire, depending on what time of day it is?" Nope, that's not their reaction. Their reaction is so ridiculous. We have to pick it apart. They cry out to Moses and say, "Why did you bring us out here to die? Weren't there enough graves in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Why did you make us leave slavery where we were burdened and where we were miserable and we had no, what? They're complaining. They were content in a life that was so much less than God planned for them. And they continue to say, "Didn't we say as we were leaving?" That's what's crazy to me. Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were leaving Egypt? Thoughts become things, friends. Your words carry power. We have discussed this before. And here's the Israelites complaining to Moses, confessing, though they may not realize that's what they're doing, confessing that they brought this on themselves because they told didn't we tell you as we left this was going to happen? That tells me they were complaining on their way out there while the Egyptians are handing them gold and silver and Moses is leading them out. You had a pile of complainers. A pile, a whole bunch of people who were complaining that something bad was about to happen. As you're on your way out, being handed gold and silver by your neighbors, as God is fulfilling all his promises, as you too have witnessed now 10 plagues, and you have seen the Lord help you to evacuate a devastating situation where you've heard the stories of your ancestors all of your life and you should know better. But instead, they're complaining. Didn't we tell you this was going to happen? Wouldn't it have been, why'd you bring us out here to die? There wasn't enough graves in Egypt. We should have just stayed as slaves. Things were better there. This is going to become a recurring theme among the people. And while I just told you that I am judging them, I shouldn't be. And you shouldn't be either. Because if I really sit and think on this, and friends, I'll be honest with you, I have sat and thought on this one. I spend a lot of time thinking about this story. We do this. And as you continue on your journey of spiritual growth, because I will tell you I am better at it now, but only newly. I'm only recently better at this, and I'm not perfect at it. I don't have this down. I'm much better than I used to be. When bad things happen now, I'm like, okay, God, I don't know what you're doing. But with curious anticipation, I will wait and see what that is. I know that you're going to provide a way out. I know that you are going to come through because you always have. So I know that you will. I don't like what I'm dealing with right now. I don't like how this looks. But I know you're going to make it okay. And I can't wait to see how you do it. And that's my actual steps on what I have learned from this story and these people and how they will continue to. This is going to be such a pattern for them over the next 40 years is going to look a lot like this. But their reaction is to admit that they doubted from the time they left Egypt, that they knew something bad was on the horizon. This is their immediate response to seeing Pharaoh coming, their immediate response to fear, discomfort, concern. They immediately are like, oh, we're going to die, and you should have just left us. We were better off as slaves. No, that's incorrect. We can't be judgmental of them and see that we do it ourselves too. When we're like, where are you, God? We were better off before we were doing this. No, there's a lot. This is what we're going to learn. This is the point of reading these stories, friends. It's not just so that we know the history, which is interesting and fascinating and good to know. I'm not saying any of that. Wonderful. I want you to know all these things. For your personal development and your spiritual growth, take something away. Acknowledge what they've done, what people do well and what people do wrong, and how you could learn and grow and do better. Their immediate response is fear. And they flip their script. They're just like, we knew this was going to happen, and now we're going to die. Like, worst case scenario, we'd have been better off slaves. Are you kidding me? That's your takeaway? And so God is going to do something they ain't never seen before. And they've just seen some pretty amazing things with all of these plagues and miracles. But God is about to really show his hand. And we will talk about that on our next episode. But until then, girl, read your Bible.